Hi, everyone. You know, wonderful cat creatures like Chocolate and Fluffy, who is about 20 feet away, have been loved and admired for centuries. Egyptians as far back as 5,000 years ago. Mummified cats in careful wrapping like this one at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. The Smithsonian curator explains that, quote, the ancient Egyptians were not obsessed with death, they were obsessed with life. So mummification was anticipating life after death with the goal to perpetuate living forever, close quote. And the Egyptians believed that cats held a unique position in the afterlife. So that's why they were mummified to be offered to the gods. Well, last week, Peru's Minister of Culture announced the discovery of this big cat on the side of a hill, hidden until now amid all the other animal figures in straight lines in the famous plains of Nazca. This cat with pointy ears, round eyes, and striped tail stretches about 121 feet or 40 yards along the hillside. Experts say it dates back to around 200 BC. So this cat was outlined here 2,200 years ago. The Peruvian culture minister announced the cat figure was found by employees who were cleaning the hill mound. Quote, the figure was barely visible and was about to disappear due to its location on a fairly steep slope and the effects of natural erosion. The lines outlining the cat vary between 30 and 40 centimeters, which is 12 to 16 inches wide, close quote. The outline goes deep enough to expose the yellowish soil beneath the dark, rocky surface. The straight lines, trapezoids, and animal glyphs between Nazca and Palpa, Peru, were first discovered in 1926 by a Peruvian archaeologist. They have remained among Peru's greatest historic mysteries. Theories about their creation have ranged from ancient farmers trudging the soil with their feet to extraterrestrial intelligences marking up the Nazca Plain and the Andes Mountains for purposes unknown. But I saw with my own eyes back in 1986 when I went to Peru for a month. I flew from Lima about 275 miles down to Nazca, which is inland from the Pacific Ocean. And there I hired a Piper Cub pilot and asked him if he would fly me over the glyphs. And I wanted to see where it went in the hills. And he told me the patterns did not stop at the plains of Nazca. He said that he had flown straight east, rising up the Andes Mountains, where he saw lots more glyphs, he said, that no one knew about. He also offered to show me how deeply the soil is pressed down where the lines and the glyphs are. In his Piper Cub small plane, he flew me along the edge of one of the trapezoids 6 miles long that looks a bit like a long airplane runway. He told me he would fly as low as possible along one side of the entire length of the trapezoid so that I could see how deeply it was pressed into the ground. I estimated the trapezoid was down into the soil at least a foot or more for the entire 6 miles. The pilot said to me, no Peruvian Indians shuffled their feet in the dirt to create this. And I want you all to look in that far left, well, on the left third, and see the dark shadow line. There are two of them, one on the right and the left, but the left is darker. And when you look at it, some people the mind does a trick, and they think that the light part, that is the runway, is up and casting a shadow down. No, that shadow is the edge where all of that trapezoid is pressed down evenly for 6 miles. The soil with the other rings and patterns. That is the surface that is dark. That 6-mile runway that pilot showed me back in 1986, it is pressed evenly down 12, 14, 17 inches. And that shadow that you can see there on the left, it is coming from the soil that is at the bottom of the shadow, where the trapezoid is, and the shadow is coming up. It's coming up toward you, looking at it, not the other way around. I think this is one of the most important points that I can make about the plains of Nazca, because the entire time I was there, I was stunned by the impression of all of those glyphs into the soil, where a lot of times in schools and the way things get told, people think they're carved on the top. So it's very important to understand they are all pressed in. Now, that was 1986. Yesterday, 207 million miles from Earth, we humans, for the first time ever, set one of our spacecraft down on an asteroid called Bennu, long enough to grab a surface rock that will be flown back to Earth in 2023.
As we started to approach Bennu from a distance and it started to fill up the camera field of view, it looked exactly like we thought it would, with a few boulders sticking out. But as we got closer, we expected to see a very sandy surface with maybe a few boulders here and there. And what we saw is very little sand. And we saw these mountains, we saw boulders, we saw rocks, and we saw very few areas that had this sandy surface that we were expecting and what we had designed to.
We have never done this before. We're actually going to collect a sample and bring it back down to Earth for further examination by scientists.
In order to achieve that objective, the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft has been navigating around Bennu for about the last 2 years, studying it in great detail, and also overcoming a number of challenges that Bennu has presented. We were looking for locations on Bennu that were 50 meters in diameter, relatively flat, and covered with fine-grained material. And by fine-grained material, I mean stuff that's the size of a dime or smaller. We realized that there were no sites on Bennu that even came close to meeting this criteria. Everywhere we looked was too small and covered with boulders. So we actually had to fly a number of additional closed passes over the asteroid and rethink our entire plan for grabbing the sample.
That film that you just saw, which is exciting. Yes, it's just an asteroid 107 million miles away, but I think that it is worth thinking about that we went there and we touched down. We didn't draw glyphs, we didn't do lines, but we got there. And it could be that the plains of Nazca were the work of some other intelligences 2,200 years ago, doing some calculations on the surface of parts of the Earth where they went for unknown reasons. And now we humans are getting ready to expand our own Homo sapiens sapien population beyond Earth. Elon Musk says he thinks he can launch one of his starships to Mars in 2024. First, without humans on board, but strictly artificial intelligence controlled from Earth. And then start taking people to Mars maybe by 2026 or 2028 to populate a self-sustaining Martian city. Listening to Musk's compelling interview, he has existential concerns, like people that I hear in the human abduction syndrome, who think some huge crisis could be coming beyond COVID-19 that will reduce the Earth's population so much that by 2050, there won't be any large cities.
I think it's helpful to have as the objective the creation of a self-sustaining city on Mars. I think this has to be the objective, not simply a few people or a base, but a self-sustaining city. The acid test really is, if the ships from Earth stop coming for any reason, does Mars die out? For any reason. It could be banal, or it could be nuclear Armageddon. Doesn't matter. If the ships stop coming for any reason, does the city on Mars die out? If it does, we're not in a secure place. So, I mean, I think this really might come down to, on the great filter front, are we going to create a self-sustaining city on Mars before or after World War III? And I think the probability of it being created after World War III, hopefully there's never a World War III, but of after is low. So we should try to make the city self-sustaining before any possible World War III. There's some chance that we will have a giant war or a super volcano, or a comet might hit the Earth, or we might just self-extinguish in some. It might be more of a whimper than a bang. And frankly, right now civilization is not looking super strong. It's just looking a little rickety right now, to be frank. It's not an escape vehicle. It's simply something that it's not like you can. I mean, unless Mars is made self-sustaining, which will probably not happen in my lifetime. It is certainly not. It's meaningless to have an escape, lifeboat or escape hatch or something, if you're simply moving to another place where you will soon die out. That doesn't count. So this is really about, say, minimizing existential risk for civilization as a whole, and then having an exciting future that you can look forward to, and a future where we are a spacefaring civilization and multi-planet species is far more exciting than one where we are not. I mean, that's an exciting future, and being forever confined to Earth until some eventual extinction event is depressing. We need things that make you want to get out of bed in the morning and be excited about the future.
Beyond Elon Musk's historic challenge to get some of human civilization to Mars, there are military whistleblowers who say there are extraterrestrial presences already in our solar system, with ET bases on Earth, our moon, Jupiter's Ganymede, Saturn's rings, and beyond. One retired military man I know says it is a fact that other intelligent life is present throughout this universe, including Mars and Earth. He is former U.S. Army Sergeant First Class Leonard Lynn Buchanan, a Defense Intelligence Agency controlled remote viewer. Sergeant Buchanan retired from the U.S. Army in a January 7, 1992 ceremony at Bolling Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. Sergeant First Class Lynn Buchanan was honored with a retirement certificate and Defense Intelligence Agency Meritorious Service Award, signed by then Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence James Clapper. Project Stargate is where Lynn Buchanan worked for 7 years, from January 1986 to January 1992, in the DIA's Secret Army Unit originally established in 1978 in Fort Meade, Maryland by the Defense Intelligence Agency and by SRI International, a California contractor in Palo Alto. Project Stargate investigated the ability of human minds to see events, sights, or information from a great distance, meaning with your mind. Amid controversial pros and cons, the CIA ended Stargate in 1991. And when I interviewed Lynn Buchanan on September 19, 2015, he had kept up his controlled remote viewing in civilian work about UFOs, ETs, and Earth's future. Why I decided to share this with you tonight is because it relates to several communications that I have recently received from some of you in the human abduction syndrome, from a clairvoyant in France, and a physicist who worked at Area 51 in the 1970s. And the repeating theme from all has been that from the year 2020 forward to 2050, there will be such overwhelming change on Earth, including population reduction and the reduction of large cities, or even the disappearance of cities. In their place will be agrarian communities where food is grown close to where people live, according to what some of you are seeing, feeling, and communicating. You've been doing a lot of controlled remote viewing after leaving the DIA operation, and we're talking in September of 2015. Do you have any impression of what is going to happen now going forward from 2015, the next 5 to 10 years? Do you have any clear impressions of what's coming?
Well, yeah, I had been tasked several years ago to look at December the 21st, 2012, and I saw that it was just going to pass unnoticed, but that actually it was a tipping point. We could have affected our own future and the future of our planet before that point, but beyond that point, it was a tipping point. And after that, nothing we can do will change the climactic problems, will change the ET problems, will change anything. We're now just sort of on a downhill slide. I found that in 2050...
2050.
That's right. We have a largely agrarian society with very few cities, and especially almost no large cities.
That's only 35 years from now.
Yeah, and that the population is very greatly reduced.
What would cause this?
I was wondering if there was going to be a war, and I had looked in that, and I found no, that there will be a large killing off of people, but not as a military war.
What does the killing?
I did go into this with many, many sessions and also connected with the people who have the detailed data and information. To my surprise, their projection is the same.
Does this tie into the fact that we have a growing population of human ET hybrids on this planet? This has come from other sources, and that the hybrid ETs are going to replace Homo sapiens sapien, but what will be the nature of the hybrids that replace Homo sapiens sapien?
The nature of the hybrids are basically going to be the fact that we have the ET genes within us. This is where our children are going to wind up seeing that pure humans are obsolete and that the planet's better off without them. These genes have been in us, not from just recently, but from ancient times.
You mean that there will be a huge die-off in the Homo sapiens sapien population and then the replacement on the planet of the human ET hybrid?
Yeah, and the die-off will not be from war, but from things like poisoning the atmosphere, poisoning our food.
If there are extraterrestrials who don't want us to live, who would like to see all humans die, and then there are friendly ETs that are here harvesting genes and involved with the human ET hybridization program, doesn't that mean that both the perceived friendlies as well as the hostiles both want the same thing? They want human Homo sapiens sapien replaced or annihilated?
From what I've found, it's only one specific type of ET that has mixed with humans successfully and has been mixing with humans for centuries and centuries. That is the type that will take over.
Are they the tall, skinny ones?
No, what the ETs look like, they look like grays, they look like tall Nordics, they look like insects, they look like reptiles. And that paper that I did split all of them into 4 categories purely on psychic ability. Nothing else. Not the way they look, not the type they are, not the species or anything else.
The part that is so confusing, Lynn, is if there are friendlies who are trying to help us become more psychic so that we are stronger against the hostiles, why wouldn't those friendlies be an ally in this future so that humans would not be killed off?
That's why they're trying to develop us, so that we will be friendly to them if we ever get out into space and take our place among the space community. Whether we're going to do that or not, I don't know.
This year of 2020, people in the human abduction syndrome have written to me about their vivid dreams of seeing some fire in the sky, some floods around the earth, earthquakes, volcanoes erupting, and even like Lynn Buchanan, describing seeing somewhere out, they think at 2050, no more huge human population to support big cities, everything looking more like farming communities. And I've thought about this. My prayers are always for life, always for light, always for love. But in these kind of strange apocalyptic feeling times, I don't think that the description of a future in 2050 without cities and more agrarian necessarily means a negative. It could be that humans finally get past war and past needing huge buildings for corporations. Maybe the world will finally be run to help and support the human family. And in that spirit, I would like to thank Maggie O, one of our viewers, who let me know today that she is introducing tonight her 79-year-old mom to my Earthfiles YouTube channel for the very first time. And Maggie writes, quote, "I can hardly wait. This will be my mom's first introduction to not only your show, but to any ET contact, UAPs, cattle mutilations. But she remembers you, Linda, from the TV news and many programs that you have hosted over the years. I am so happy for Mom to acknowledge and absorb the information tonight. She will be 80 on January 22nd, 2021. So pray for us. We need the help of love from the hearts of all of us awakening. May your work be blessed continually in truth. Stay safe. Keep healthy. Warmest agape love, Maggie." And an agape digital hug to you and your mom and your family and to everyone here tonight on the other side of the lens and the zeros and ones. I am so glad that in this horrible COVID pandemic that we can continue to gather on these Wednesday nights and that we are a growing group. We've passed 154,000. I would love it if every single one of you tonight, you know 2 people who are not subscribers, ask them if they will subscribe. And maybe we'll get another 10,000 by New Year's Eve, getting out of 2020 into 2021. And we could do another great celebration if we could break through, let's say, another several thousand between now and the end of December. Try it. All of you listening, just talk to 2 people who aren't subscribers. And it would be great to do a jump up into the new year, hoping that this will be 2021, the year we left COVID behind. I'm praying for that. So I also have an update from Kenya. I've gotten emails from you all wondering what the status is on that family, the dear Keegan family who had the pregnant cow that was found bloodlessly mutilated and the calf removed in what I have seen in the past in my investigations. Well, I have received through WhatsApp a couple of notes from Sarah JG. She's a smart, wonderful woman who is a reporter for Kenya News Agency. I've really, really enjoyed being able to communicate with her. And she said that she was going to, this week, try to get Sarah to a bank in Nairobi to at least open up an account, because she and her husband and their family, they don't have a bank account, or they don't have any way that we could do a fundraiser to try to replace the cow. And I just a couple of days ago received, she was going to do the meeting with Sarah Keegan, and Sarah, the JG, the reporter, stepped on a board that had a nail that went into her leg, bless her heart, and it was rusty, so she had to go to a hospital, and she is trying to recover from that, and said, as soon as I can, I'll let you know that we open up at least a bank account that we could do a GoFundMe to replace the cow and some money for the food. And she also has done some research in the whole general area. And I thought tonight I would just let you know that the Keegan pregnant cow is not the only mutilation that they have had in that area around the big tea corporation, all those beautiful lands in Kericho in Kenya. She said that there have been at least 3 other mutilations in the years 2012, 2013, and 2015 before this current year of 2020 in the pregnant cow. And this is coming from the chief of a tribe there, Elijah Rupp. And it's still, all of these are in the Bareti sub-county of Kericho, which is where the pregnant cow was also mutilated this year. She said all of them were female. So we have got 3 before the pregnant cow. So 4 female animals aged between 5 and 6 years. No blood on any of the excisions. Their unborn calves in all of these cases have been removed. No blood. The incidents all happened at night. Not only were there no signs of blood in the immediate area, there was none on the ground, and in all these cases, they looked for footprints. They could find no signs of struggle, nothing. And she said, because I said, if you can get photos of these other 3 animal mutilations, we could have quite a report in a new genre. She said that the tribe leader, Elijah Rupp, said that all of the photos had been lost when the phone that they had was damaged. So that happens in other places as well. At least I've got a new connection in Kenya with a bright reporter and the Keegan family, and I'll keep you apprised. And when we have a next ground on which it seems stable that we could do a GoFundMe to help them replace the cow and some feed, I'll announce how we do it here, because we're still in the process of trying to figure out what to do in Africa. So now, with all of that, Peggy, I would like to hear what the comments and the questions are tonight.
Hi, Linda. First, I'd love to thank everybody for their super chats. So thank you, everyone. Minnesota Folk, Cat Chaser, Jeffrey Rizzo, Moonbird, Manny, Javier Velez, Kendall 1090, Barry Marlowe, Rebecca Cole, Om Mystery, Winnie Gustafson, Channeling the Heart, Barbara Joyce, The Major, California Girl, Manny, Doreen Garby, Leslie Hoskins, Alien Life, Carlene Boyce, Liz Gaspari, and Brad Bryant, and one more name just came through, Michelle Hertzberg. Thank you, everyone, for your super chats.
And Peggy, congratulations for
That was a long list to get through tonight.
That was great. It almost sounded like you were going to do it on one breath, too. Well, bless Peggy and Eric and Brad and all of you and everybody. Thank you so much. And in this both troubled time and maybe hopeful, if we could get out of this horrible coronavirus, and then life would be like, you'd feel like you were springing back into a higher new frequency. What kind of questions and comments do we have tonight?
I have a great question here. Somebody wanted to know, if humans are psychic, does that mean that they have alien DNA?
Well, that is a very good question, and that I don't think I've ever contemplated at exactly that level. I just read a paper about the whole issue of looking back far into before Neanderthal and going back. And the paper wasn't written in the context of ET, but it was written having to do with the Minoan kingdom, and that there definitely is very interesting genetics going way, way back into the ancient Greeks. And I had the question in my mind that if I went to those scientists and took that work to somebody who is actually trying to look for the presence of something that would be definitely non-humanoid primate from the Earth, would they be able to have a marker? Would there be a marker? So that's the other side of this question. I can say with what I consider to be confidence that it is a correct statement. Homo sapiens sapien is the result of genetic manipulation of already evolving primates by extraterrestrial biological entities. That, to me, is an accurate and honest statement. To fill it out into all of the lines that come from the tree of life of Homo sapiens sapien, and before that Neanderthalensis, and going back and Denisovans and all of the branches and roots and the mystery of standing up primates since Homo erectus 2 million years ago. What would be the marker for a geneticist to say to the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Guardian and around the world, this is proof, this is hard proof that this set of humans, Homo sapiens sapien, were the direct product of genetic manipulation by extraterrestrial biological entities? I think that that information exists, certainly in the United States government, but it doesn't exist in any kind of a public or medical public forum. That's one of the best kept secrets in areas of research. So I guess as best we can do at the end of 2020 is say that I and a few others have had direct discussions with people who have worked in genetics, who have done some research trying to come up with a way to investigate. And it may have occurred, but we do not have anything that is in front of us in a document that could hold up in a court of law and become the new revolutionary context for the evolution of humans on this earth. That's what we are waiting for. That's what we need to move the earth onto a much more accurate, honest, historic context. So I'm going to throw it back to you and say, hold these questions on genetics. And maybe next year, maybe it'll finally break open. As soon as we have that headline, we're not alone in the universe, as soon as people with direct knowledge and evidentiary material stand up in front of CNN and other televisions around the world and on the internet and say, yes, it is accurate. Homo sapiens sapien is the result of genetic manipulation of already evolving primates on this planet. It is a big story. It is complex. There are many, many facets that relate to many different civilizations in this universe that have been involved with this planet and use this planet like a laboratory. And certainly not everybody has all the answers. That, what I just said, is as close to the big truth as I can possibly muster. I would assume that when you're dealing with the telepathic ones, as Lynn Buchanan, the wonderful control remote viewer, said in an interview excerpt that I used back in July, that when he did control remote viewing and others when they were tasked, that they found that throughout the universe there was a lot of consciousness, but it was divided into four groups that were subdivided into psychic versus non-psychic. They were the friendlies who were telepathic, the friendlies who were not, the hostiles that were telepathic, the hostiles that were not, and the neutrals that were friendly and the neutrals that were not. And that is a big statement in and of itself, that we can't assume that all consciousness and beings through this universe, from one end to the other, are all telepathic. And not all humans are telepathic, but there are many humans on this earth right now who have the ability to receive telepathic communication and send telepathic communication. Coming back full circle to your question, would telepathy be a sure sign of genetic manipulation by ETs putting their genes in evolving primates on Earth to make sure that there was a telepathic ability? I don't know the answer, but Lynn would say not all ETs are telepathic, and so you're back to that question that haunts all of us. Which type of ETs? Tall, short, thin, robust, gray, white, blonde-haired, red-haired, black-haired, no hair, large heads, all of it. Which ones are strictly telepathic and which are ones that utter speech? So it is complicated. But thank you for asking. It made me think more tonight, because I'm very interested in this whole issue of how do you prove genetic source. So we'll just keep hoping we get more valid information. What about another question?
A viewer asked, do you know if any of the captured aliens here on Earth communicated any information regarding our existence here? And have they said why we are actually here?
The answer is some of the experiencers or abductees, and I'm thinking right now of Billy Meyer in Austria and Switzerland, Austria area. Back in 79 to 80, because that's when I was working on A Strange Harvest. I was working with Dr. Leo Sprinkle. He was head of counseling and testing at the University of Wyoming. He had talked with Jacques Vallée about the Billy Meyer case. Dr. Sprinkle was doing then, and people didn't know this, he was doing free of charge. College students and others who came to him a light came into my room. I heard this buzzing. I floated out of my bed. I was taken through a window. Dr. Sprinkle had started trying to help people at the university who had those kinds of descriptions. And that's how Leo Sprinkle became interested in abductions that led to discussions with Jacques Vallée about Billy my ear. And Leo Sprinkle calling me up and said, "You've got to talk with Jacques Vallée." And my becoming then interested in a story that had spectacular photographs. That discussion, I remember very distinctly, was December of 1979 with Dr. Sprinkle. And because Dr. Sprinkle was in conversations with the people who were interfacing with Billy my ear, I ended up getting a gift that Christmas of the two, I think it was the first volume and then later, and they are the big square books that had all of these photographs of craft and allegedly a blonde ET named Semyase. Some of you may have seen those books. And with comments written, they're really quite beautiful books, with comments allegedly from Semyase and these blonde, some of them were blonde, and some of them were brown-haired. All of them were, I believe, in the Billy my ear case, the ones that he dealt with were female, very light-skinned and blue eyes, but with different brown hair, blonde hair. And in those two books, you get quotes of what you would fantasize that you would hope contact with another civilization in the universe would be like. It's about, you are our brothers and sisters. We are here to monitor. You need to grow and evolve, and to them, humans are like children that have been set in motion. I mean, it's all very, very polite and wonderful and beautiful. And in that context, if the Billy my ear case, which has become extremely controversial, but I'm sharing with you what I specifically remember in the fall of '79 talking about with Jacques Vallée and with Dr. Leo Sprinkle. It was not controversial then outside of a small group of people who were going to look at the photographs. Jacques Vallée had been there, had walked all of the grounds, said that he thought it was a reasonable case to consider the possibility that some of what was being photographed and being described may have occurred, but not proof. So in that case, any of the humanoids that have expressed to abductees, which have, in my mind, a few beyond the Billy my ear case, they're saying, you are our brothers and sisters. That does not happen in the abduction cases with the Greys. And about the reptilians, I know less about the communications that would be familiar or familial when it comes to the reptiles, because the truth is most of the abduction cases that I have investigated, gotten illustrations, done recorded interviews with people who have had some kind of an extensive interaction by their discussion with the reptiles, it's not really what I would consider to be pleasant. It's more aggressive. Not something that you would think that the beings there would look at us as their brothers and sisters. So on a scale having to do with communication, I would say that, again, the best answer that has been given is still by Lynn Buchanan on this whole issue of communication between ETs about their relationship to us. And that is friendlies, neutrals, unfriendlies, and that the hostiles want to eliminate us and the friendlies are trying to help us. And I don't think that's the universe that any of us ever thought would be the reality. But if it is, Earth is a reflection of the big universe. Now, let's see. I think we've got time for 2 or 3 more. I will try to hurry up. These have been really good questions. They've made me think sitting here. And I think that's when I talk the longest, because I'm thinking it out and I'm talking to you while I think. So let's try a third one.
This is a question from somebody in Australia, and they asked, once you talked about the portholes above Australia, could you spend a moment and talk about where they're located?
Okay, now I think something's been conflated. In my Antarctica documentary with Spartan 1 and Spartan 2, Spartan 1 personally, physically, interacted with and knew about a portal in Hawaii that went point to point to Gakona, Alaska, and knew that we have the United States military and intelligence, certain highly classified unit, have been moving portal to portal, and it's not clear if those portals were extraterrestrially constructed and have been here for thousands or millions of years. That part I don't know, and I don't know if Spartan 1 knew the original source, but he talked about that in the context of his briefings and his knowledge about his work in Antarctica. In Australia, in terms of specific knowledge about portals, if the person who's asked this question wants to give me more details, but I'm wondering if it's conflated with my talking about how in the 1950s, the United States government did a treaty with the government of Australia, and they bought that center Pine Gap region. It's treated, more than bought, I guess, treaty, but I think money was exchanged. That's why I remember. And Pine Gap, as I understand it, unless there's been more secret treaties and negotiations that have nullified it, that since the 1950s, the United States of America had ownership of the Pine Gap, Australia, right in the center of the big, huge continent of Australia. And they paid farmers to move out of the land that the United States wanted to clear of every wire, every electrical device, get a completely controllable, where they knew there was no electromagnetic signal that they were not accounting for. Then, with that as a place that the National Security Agency has operated, as I understand it, specifically having to do with extraterrestrial monitoring and all of that, you may have thought that in describing that I was talking about a portal. I'm not saying there is or isn't. Jim Marrs, when he did his work, Spies, P-S-I, S-P-I-E-S, a book I recommend to all of you to read. Jim went into information back to controlled remote viewers, the same group, Stargate group, that Lynn Buchanan was in in the DIA in Washington. And those remote viewers worked with Jim Marrs when he did that book, talking about what they felt that they could without violating their non-disclosures. And that had to do with certain mountains, certain places on the Earth that they had remote viewed were definitely bases for various types of non-humans. Very consistent with what I have told you that I have learned both from Spartan 1 and especially the DIA analyst in December of 1999 in that 7-hour discussion when he talked to me about our government knowing that there were 3 competing civilizations that 270 million years have been using and experimenting on this planet, and that they chose to go in mountains deep under oceans. They're on the Earth. They don't have to go light years or pop through portals. They're here cohabiting with us right now. And that would explain why there could be so many quote unquote UFO sightings in any given day, month, year, going back to World War II and before that, where the non-humans with their advanced intelligence, they don't have to pop to someplace 30 light years away. They're here. And according to him, these 3 competing groups have been using this entire solar system, as well as the Earth, for 270 million years. And so the idea of portals, to me, are where we know for a fact that there's been a construction around a natural collapse in the magnetic fields, possibly, or that the ETs know how to create a magnetic portal. And the one in Antarctica, it's not Australia, but back to Antarctica. The big one that Spartan 1 said was definitely a portal that interconnected with a portal in the rings of Saturn that took them out into the Milky Way, is the Wilkes Land magnetic anomaly. For those of you who have my documentary, you will know that there's a map with a very clear location of where that is. For those of you who don't have my Antarctica documentary, Ancient Alien Secrets Beneath the Ice, not the ancient part, that's the TV series I do, the Alien Secrets Beneath the Ice, that I would suggest everybody get that documentary. The downloads from Vimeo and Amazon are so simple. And then I have the physical DVDs in a lovely case. And there really is a lot of truth and substance and fact in that hour documentary. Spartan 1 was there, and he spoke from truth for me. And everybody should know what Spartan 1 and Spartan 2 say in that documentary. Because in the opening throes of whatever is going to happen, whenever our government or China or Russia or India or whoever it is going to have the courage to finally step up to the plate and tell the world the truth, we're not alone in this universe and never have been. And that we have had different types here based throughout this solar system and on this planet for millions of years. Then the discussions about these portals that can go bing, bing, 30 light years is going to fall out of those kinds of admissions eventually. But I think that the portals are still kept as the greatest secret, because if you know how to move point to point in this universe, it would explain the difference between a PhD in nuclear physics and a newborn baby. That's the way I look at it. And I think that we humans are kept in a kind of babyhood in all of this. And yet, I think that we have the potential in our soul, in our mind, and spirit. I think that we have the potential to travel this entire universe. And then it won't be a question of whether we have cities or farm city hybrids on Earth. It will be like Elon Musk. Are we going to be able to get to Mars and get a self-sustaining city before we blow this planet up? We have to get past ever having even the thought of blowing up Earth. I mean that in the general, generic sense of nuclear war. So when that's still a possibility, we're still babies. We're still tribal, as Stanton Friedman always said. When we get past that, and we know that we can then have a base on Mars and not worry about whether or not everything got so destroyed back here, they'd never get any supplies from Earth again. Wow, what a feeling. Trapped on Mars. Well, you better then go to Mars when you have a huge support of being able to grow your own food and whatever else that Elon Musk has in mind. He's right. So those that can move point to point, they're so far beyond our comprehension, but I think they exist. And we may not ever really interface with them because we are babies. We really, really are. And we need help. We don't need war. We need help. Okay, how about one more?
This comes from a viewer who would love to know what's your opinion on the Mayans being moved off planet. What happened to them?
It was one of the more interesting discussions that I ever had with a government whistleblower. This was a person in Washington, D.C. It goes back to the late 1980s. I remember very specifically, I was working on a documentary for PBS about chemistry. And in this discussion, this person sought me out because they knew about my documentary, A Strange Harvest. And in this incredible discussion, it started with what could be the reason for bloodless, trackless animal mutilations. I'm asking in the frustration of it happens. I had learned by then that the excisions showed evidence of high heat. I had been working with Dr. Altschuler. We were doing the kind of pathology that would hold up in a court of law. We knew that hearts could be removed in the animals without any surgery in the chest or the ribs, that the pericardium could be left in the chest without a cut. We knew that that had to be in the range of molecular surgery, all of that. And as I was laying out my questions and frustrations about why would extraterrestrial biological entities come to this planet or be based on this planet and go to the surface life, cattle, horses, goats, sheep, pigs, chicken, a marmot, foxes, rabbits, these have all been found bloodlessly mutilated, and cats, the half-cat syndrome. Why would they do that and leave the bodies to be found that shocks and repulses humans? And this provoked this insight into the creation of the Mayans. I'll give you the short version. He said from his understanding, it was the Greys. Now, when we say Greys today, you really have to attach the words, the menagerie of artificial intelligence in doll-like figures, 2 feet tall, 2.5 feet tall, 3 feet tall, 3.5 feet tall. When you start getting up to 4 to 5, you may be getting into organic species, probably for sure when you get up to the 7-foot grays. They work in this huge complex. And he said, they have been mixing and matching genes and experimenting on this planet for a long time. And they like to do experiments where they can control, let's say, and this was what this person said, they like to do an experiment and put it on an island or on a peninsula or high in a mountain, places where there wouldn't be a mix of whatever they made, and that one of those was in Bhutan, in the Himalayas. In Bhutan, this man said that he had worked on a project and knew that the Greys 2,000 years ago had mixed and matched genes in Bhutan specifically to harvest and put in the Yucatan Peninsula, in what we think of today as Central America. And that what flourished from that Bhutanese genetic manipulation was the Mayans. And he said, you have read enough to know that they had such precise information about the orbit of Venus. They were almost obsessed with math. He said that's the influence of the Greys on their experiment, the Mayans as an experiment. And I said, if the Mayans were a genetic experiment of the Greys, would that explain, I mean, are you, because we had started out in animal mutilations, are you suggesting that there is a tie between the harvesting of material from the animals and that the Mayans would have these ball games and the victor is the winner would have his heart cut out while his heart was beating and hold it up to the gods? Is there some connection? And he said, I understand the point that you are making. And he said, and I can't give you a precise answer, but we do know that the Mayans were involved with what we would consider to be a lot of violence in their sports, but we don't know what it was that the Greys specifically were doing a hybrid in this planet or genetic manipulation. And he said, but I can tell you this, it wasn't harvest problems, it wasn't drought, that in 850 AD, the Greys sent a mission and they took the vast majority of that entire Mayan experiment from the Yucatan. And Linda, as far as I know, they occupy a planet, an entire planet. The Greys took their Mayan experiment from the Bhutan and put it on a planet. And he said, I don't know if someday humanity will be shown images, but he said, there is a Mayan planet out there in the Milky Way galaxy, and the Greys put it there. Whichever you are feeling, meaning some of this seems like science fiction. But if you just put it into that category, what if this is true? The size and the scope of the experimentation on this planet Earth by different ET civilizations has been huge. And the excitement that I feel is trying to understand as much as I can and keep reporting to you and getting your great questions and staying in this dialogue. And let's keep growing this group, because maybe 2021 will finally bring us that head-cracking headline. We're not alone, and once that happens, all of the questions in all directions are fair game for all of us in public discussion. And maybe we will finally begin to learn all of the evidentiary material that we would like to have about our past, our present, and our future, that will include, let's hope, Elon Musk's self-sustaining civilization on Mars and whatever they find there underground. See you next Wednesday. I love you.